he had had a few surgeries to see if we could clear out the cancer in his head. And she didn't think she was getting the right answers. And so we took a risk of driving to Houston, Texas, and going to MD Anderson Hospital there. We were there not even a week. And the doctor on call calls us in and says, I've seen cases like this. You'll be lucky if you get 3 to 6 months left with your son.
Welcome to On Air with Chai, a podcast that inspires, brings hope, shows strength and resilience. I'm Bryan, one of your hosts. Today, we speak with Rik Zortman, aka the Human Etch-A-Sketch. We'll be discussing the hardship of losing a young child to brain cancer and the strength it took to overcome. We'll also hear about how Rik turned this devastating event into a positive. Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of On Air with Chai. My name is Bryan Strasberg. I'm joined with Executive Director Mordechai Rothman of
Hello.
Canada. And today is a very special guest of ours, Rik Zortman, aka the Human Etch-A-Sketch. And if you remember your childhood and those amazing little red toys with the white knobs, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where you draw a picture and you shake it off to get rid of it. I'm hoping in your case there's no shaking involved with getting rid of these names. Thank you very much for reaching out to us. This is incredible. Your story is an amazing one. I know you've been through a lot with your family and with your backstory and with everything you go through now and what you do and what you stand for. So when you kind of dive into that a little bit and lead us on a journey of where you started, how it started, and to where you are now.
And don't start from the beginning. Like, let's go. Who's Rik Zortman from the childhood and go from there.
Absolutely. So I was never a runner. I was, when I was in 6th grade, in a local school in Western Iowa, small town school, West Monona, I would, I did track and field. I did the 100-yard dash. I did the high jump. I did the long jump. I thought that was cool. Back in the day, everybody was a runner then. And then my family moved and I really didn't want to be in track anymore because I didn't know anybody. I wasn't fast enough. I couldn't jump as high as everybody. So I was like, okay, so I can't do this. So, never a runner, and ended up getting married and having, 5 wonderful kids. And in 2008, while I was deployed overseas as a military contractor, I get a call from my youngest child's mom, who is in Iowa. And, we're married at the time. And she calls me, and I'm 7,000 miles away. And she goes, Armstrong has had a seizure. And I'm like, okay, just keep me posted on things. Because, I can't go anywhere. I'm 7,000 miles away. It's not like I can hop on a plane and come home. But I was granted medical emergency leave. I came home that Monday. The doctor had just come out of surgery and said, I don't know how to tell you this. Your son has 4 different types of cancer. We're going to call it glioblastoma grade 4. And that was my November. I do believe it was the 24th of November. And that was the day that my life was kind of shaken upside down because we had never had cancer in our family. I never knew anybody that had cancer. Never really even went to a funeral of anybody that had cancer. So it kind of shook me up a little bit. I didn't know what was going on. They said, we're going to try radiation. We're going to try and shrink the tumor, and then we'll kind of go from there. And so during that time, I went back overseas, gathered my things, and then came back home for good at the end of December. At that time, we were seeing a specialist in Omaha, Nebraska, at Children's Hospital in Omaha. And my wife at the time, Lindsay, decided she wanted a second opinion on Armstrong. He had had a few surgeries to see if we could clear out the cancer in his head. and she didn't think she was getting the right answers. And so we took a risk of driving to Houston, Texas, and going to MD Anderson Hospital there. We were there not even a week, and the doctor on call calls us in and says, I've seen cases like this. You'll be lucky if you get 3 to 6 months left with your son. And you can either stay down here, or you can go back home, spend time there, and he can pass away close to family and friends. So we decided to come back to Children's Hospital in Omaha. Like any parent would, they always want a second opinion. And we got our second opinion, and it wasn't what we wanted to hear. So we tried the radiation all throughout the month of February. And then in March, they said that they needed a month-long break to see, how the tumor was responding to it. April 1st of 2009, he went in and saw the doctors, and we got the news on my birthday, April 3rd, 2 days later, saying that there was more tumors on his brainstem and that they wouldn't be able to operate on it. So with that being said, we tried to spend as much time with him as possible. He sat in a reclining chair in our living room, and he couldn't walk. He couldn't talk. He was only 3 years old. So he just sat there and kind of absorbed what we were all going through. We tried to include him in things, but he couldn't move his hands, couldn't move his arms. He was wearing diapers. We had to change him. And we would just try and interact with him as much as possible. April 9th, 6 days later, late at night, he had a seizure and was transported to the local hospital in Harlan, which was 15 miles north of where we were living in Avoca. And Lindsay had gone into the ambulance with Armstrong up there. And I had to round up the other 3 kids at the time. My oldest was living in Des Moines with his mom, but I rounded up the 3 other kids, and they went to the neighbors, not knowing really what was going on. They knew he was sick, but they didn't really know how or if he would ever recover. And so by the time I got to the hospital, Lindsay and I had the conversation of if it was selfish or not to let him go. And as parents, it's the toughest conversation to have, because you don't want to lose your child, even though he's fought cancer, and with the stories that he had gone through and lost his ability to talk, lost his ability to walk. I had finally agreed on it, and not even 2 minutes later, the nurse came in and told us the news that he had passed away. So we went in there and we saw him, and we held him for as long as we could, like any other parent would. The funeral was a few days later, and a week after the funeral, our town was having a local 5K run, and they wanted to dedicate it to Armstrong. And like I said, I was never a runner. So with that being said, I said, yeah, I'll come out, we can come out. I'll do what I can to run. It's a 5K, 3.1 miles. Shouldn't be that hard, even though I've never ran, in a while. And that race, I ran 95% of it. And the only reason why I didn't run 100% of it is because I had a friend of mine that wanted to see how I was doing. And we ended up walking 2 blocks so I could tell her how things were going and how the kids were doing. And with all that being said, we had a decent turnout. Our town's only 1,500 people, and we had maybe 50 to 100 people there. It was a good turnout for a race that someone had just thought of and wanted to help us out. I picked up running after that, and I didn't really log my runs back then like I do now, but I would go out and maybe do a few miles here, a few miles there. I signed up for a half marathon, signed up for, a marathon, did some 5Ks, just did some races off and on until 2017. 8 years later, I started doing my logging for my runs. And I started to figure out, I don't know why it took me 8 years to figure this out, but I figured out that the GPS dot, when you run, follows you anywhere you go. And I had to put 2 and 2 together. Most people go out, post their runs, call it good. And, here's my 5 miles, here's my 10 miles, here it is. But when I finally put 2 and 2 together, I wondered if I could, draw or run names or words. And one of the first ones I did was wow, which, is pretty easy. Or if you flip it upside down, it's mom. But I was trying to figure out how I could do all these different things while running. And the town that I was in, most of my runs were diagonal because the way the town was set up. It was in grid form, but not in the way that, back then I knew only to run diagonally. So I started running names. I started doing words. I started doing, names of my friends. And September 2017 came along. And September's Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And I started putting out there, like, I'm running names of kids fighting cancer this month. If anybody has a name or a story and they want to reach out to me, I'll run their name to the best of my ability. I started doing names in Avoca, and then I moved it up 15 miles to Harlem because it was more of a bigger gridded area. And then I would move it to Atlantic, which was east of Avoca. So I was trying to move areas to figure out how I could fit the bigger names in, because I couldn't figure the biggest names in Avoca. I had to go to different towns. That month, with the help of a couple other friends, we ended up doing 101 names that month.
Wow.
And we still had names left over. And I just didn't want to, spill them all out, and do, names continuously. So I started mixing them up. I started doing words and I started doing phrases. In October of 2017, Tom Petty passed away. And being part of a running community, being part of a cancer community, and helping others along the way, I figured, what better song of Tom Petty's to run would be I Won't Back Down. So I basically sketched it out on paper first so I would know where to go. And with those type of big phrases like that, I actually have to start backwards. So on like this one, I had to start with the N, the W, the O, the D, K, C, A, B for back down, and then go up and then spell out I won't. And that was kind of a post of mine that I threw out there. I'm like, this is for those fighting. This is a phrase that, some of us need to have with us. And I started going into different groups because I was being invited, because people were seeing what I was doing. They're like, we want you in our group. We want you, share your message with our group. And I know there's quite a few people in this group that, they want to hear from you. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Pretty cool. So I started doing words, started doing phrases. There'd be some days where I wouldn't even run either one at all. I just go out for a run. I'd sign up for races. I do races, half marathons, full marathons, 5Ks. Some of the days where I didn't want to sketch, I would just go out and run and go as fast, because when I do a GPS run, I don't try and do it for the speed. I want it for the accuracy of the name. And if you're running too fast, the GPS dot, and I've kind of figured this out, goes further than you go. So you need to slow down when you get to a corner to turn. So with going to a few different cities, I was also in the process of getting ready to be deployed overseas. And I didn't even know how I was going to do that overseas. So before I went overseas, I sketched every letter. So that way, if I had stories to come with me, I could see if I could maybe patch the letters together, maybe form names. I honestly didn't know how I was going to do this. So I was stationed in Qatar at Al-Udeid Air Base for 6 months. And the way the layout was, I couldn't show the base. I could show the basic route that I took. I couldn't show anything else. And I was going by steps. So the longer the name, the less steps I was taking to get the letters done. And it took a while to figure out. I mean, there was half of an area where I had all trailers, and I would run past trailers just to try and keep a straight line. And then there was an area where there was nothing. So I had to figure out, how straight of a line I needed to go. In 6 months, I did over 400 names.
Wow.
And it was something that I needed. It was like my sanity over there, because over there you either worked, you ate, you slept, or you can hang out with friends. You could, go. We had some concerts there. We had a gathering center of the plaza where, you could meet up, and they were just getting Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi was getting huge there. So people would bring the computers and doing all this and that. And yet here I was running every day, sometimes 2 names a day, sometimes 3 names a day. There was a time where I did 8 names in a day because I had the day off and I really had nothing else to do. So,
Rik, I have so many questions. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how you maintain that and how that worked for you?
yes, it was, if you had one child that had cancer and you only had one child in your family, all your focus is on that one child. When you have 4 in the house, your focus is on little things at a time. So like, if Lindsay was focusing on Armstrong, I would focus on the 3 other kids. If I was focusing on Armstrong, November went into December, he could still walk. He could still talk. He was doing great. So it seemed like between December and January was the ability where he lost his ability to talk and walk. And then his only way that he could communicate was a thumbs up. It was like, is everything all right? And he would slowly raise his fingers. But with the other kids, they still had to go to school. And the school that we had for them was across the street. Like they would walk out the front door, across the street, boom, they're right there at school. So they didn't have, it was so nice at that time where they had the school there. And you're talking November, December, January, February, in that time area, when it's cold, they could just walk to school. Well, we also had some tragedy at that time because were needing another vehicle because we only had one vehicle and we needed another one to go back and forth to Omaha because Omaha was like 45 minutes. So we had bought a car online from Chicago, brought it home. And 4 days later, we went out to go to the doctor's appointment, came out and someone had stole all 4 tires. The car was on blocks. And it was like, seriously, a cancer family.
Wow.
And someone
can't catch a break.
No. And I don't think they ever found out who did it, because we lived so close to the interstate that somebody must have drove around, saw it there out in the open. And, this is before Ring and all the other, security footage, that once we woke up, we're like, you've got to be kidding me. Who would take 4 tires from a car from a cancer family when they're going through all that?
So you mentioned that you took care of you had to take care of the other kids, which is a hallmark of actually what we do at High Lifeline. We believe strongly that illness might be impacting one child, but the entire family is affected, and all the brothers and sisters, they need attention. And so we take that seriously. But it's like, it sounds like you couldn't catch a break. You had to be strong for your family, and you maintain that by focusing on the needs of your family. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair assessment. And the thing is that when I had come home for good from the military, from my military deployment as a contractor, I wasn't working. So I was at home all the time. And Lindsay was trying to do she was a counselor in a county away. So we would try our best to make sure our lives were normal, even though they weren't. And it was tough. I mean, you have 4 kids ranging from 8 to 3.
Wow.
And they were
Busy house.
Yeah, it was
Busy
boom.
house. So I have some other questions I'm going to get to later on. I'm going to let Bryan ask you some things, but I am curious, how would you say running in particular helped you cope with this loss? What is it about running that was so, it sounds like, therapeutic for you to handle such adversity in your life?
And to this day, I still say it's therapy for me. And even if I go out for 2 miles, or if I go out for, a full marathon, it's therapy for me, because I can think back on Armstrong. I can think back on all the others that I've run for, and the stories and the people that I've met. And it is therapy. I mean, they say running's free, but it's really not, because you have to buy the shoes, and then your shoes wear out and you got to buy another pair of shoes. But it is a cheap exercise. And I honestly think it saved my life, because back then, with 4 kids going on, I wasn't really doing any exercise. My exercise maybe was walking to church and back, which was a block away. I really wasn't doing any exercise, because my contracting job was mostly sitting down, and the only exercise I got was pretty much walking from my lodging to work. So I really wasn't doing any exercise. And I picked up running because my son, he liked 3 things. The 3 top things he liked were Diego. He liked to eat, and I have no problem doing that. And then he loved to run. And I wanted to pick up running because that's what he liked to do. And
so it reminds you of him when you run.
Absolutely. And he didn't get a chance to run very much, but I do believe he sends signals once in a while that he's still with me, and he gets me to cry every once in a while. He has that capability of doing that.
I'm sure he sends you messages all the time.
We're both runners ourselves. I can definitely speak for myself, though. When I run, it's usually therapeutic for me as well when I get out there on the trail, because I know it's a time for me and a time to clear my head and just deal with whatever issues I'm dealing with at that time. Going through everything you went through with, correct me if I'm wrong, you were an Army Ranger, or you are an Army Ranger?
I spent 20 years as United States Air National Guardsman. um, for 2 different units in Iowa, and just recently retired in 2020.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
I know that with running, it takes it's a whole mental game. Running, you're going out there, you're gonna run however far you're going. You need to make sure you get back in while running and not dragging yourself on the floor. Having that kind of mindset now with going out, coming back in, knowing why you're doing it, having that purpose kind of thing, being able to have the kind of training that you got through the military and everything, was any of that helpful, or how was it helpful dealing and coping with the loss of your son? Did any of that kind of kick in where you're kind of like, okay, this is all happening now, it's fight or flight, and I got to handle my family right now and deal with my kids and my wife and everything else going on?
I know it definitely helps, because when I first started running, my oldest, who was, I think, let me think here, he was 15, and a couple years later, he had seen that I had started running, and he was actually part of a triathlon trio that we had in Des Moines, and I was surprised that he wanted to do it. So we actually found a swimmer. I was the cyclist, and he was the runner that ran in this, and he wanted to do something for Armstrong as well. And so with him doing the running portion of it, he ran a little bit. I don't think he runs anymore, but seeing that, and then seeing my daughter down the road pick up cross country for a year, and then picking up soccer. And of course, soccer, you run back and forth chasing a ball. That helped a little bit, knowing that they were doing their part in trying to remember Armstrong, because the morning after they came home after his death, my daughter realized it more than my 2 sons, because my 2 youngest, they really didn't quite grasp death at that time, because they had asked if they could play Nintendo. So, and we were like, that's fine. And I can't really speak for them now on how they feel about losing their brother, but I know for, a couple of my children, doing, a couple things in remembrance of him, of doing, running things, it's hopefully therapeutic for them as well.
For sure. I was just wondering, one of the big things that we do at High Lifeline Canada is with the families is a lot of support. Whether the kids are in hospital, we have volunteers that can go hang out with the kids at times when we are allowed in the hospitals. We do a lot of home respite stuff. We do advocacy stuff in the hospitals, helping the families navigate the system and everything. So I'm just kind of curious, what was your support like at the beginning of all this when you found out Armstrong had the cancers and everything and going for treatments? Did you guys have a strong base? Did you have family and friends coming in? Was the hospital able to receive you guys properly? Were they accommodating?
The hospital in Omaha, we really didn't take our kids in with Armstrong, because they were in school at the time. And so they would go to school, and then we would take Armstrong in. He would do his radiations. Sometimes they would knock him out. And towards the end, he was so tired that they didn't knock him out. He would just lay there, take the radiation, and would come home. So they really didn't go to the hospital very much. They went a couple times. The hospital was fine with that. You're talking also pre-COVID, by the way. So, they were like, if he needs to stay a night or two for precautionary reasons, your family's more than welcome to come. Our family, my mom at the time, I think, lived in North Carolina. My dad lived 2 hours away, so they really weren't much help. My mom tried, with the phone calls, but, even she wasn't experiencing cancer. Neither was my dad. So we basically just relied on the support of the community. And if our kids needed to go to a school function, they would get rides. from others because, you're talking a community of 1,500 people. You're not talking, huge city. I mean, these communities are small. So we got help with the community, doing the small things, taking the kids to different places. And we really valued that support because after Armstrong had died, we didn't expect any more support. And I do believe every Tuesday for 6 weeks after he passed away, we had families coming in. I guess there was some sort of, I can't really figure out the word, but there was some sort of sign up that they had where different families brought us food.
Like
yeah. So showing.
Sorry, go ahead.
So showing that support, made us feel more of a valued community because we moved into that community at 2007. So we weren't even there a year and a half when this started.
So, one of the things about having a sick child or really having any illness, serious illness, I'm told, is the isolation that you feel. People don't necessarily really get it, what you're going through. They understand and they're empathetic as much as they can be, but even to lose a child, there's no one who can understand that except somebody who might have also lost a child. And when you started running and creating these names, I'm sure you must have been, it sounds like it started slowly, but then it kind of like, there was a tipping point. Malcolm Gladwell talks about the tipping point, and it sounds like at some point there was just like this overwhelming number of names of people who were interested in you running in writing their names on a Strava run or something of the like. And can you tell me how that must have felt to you as someone who lost a child and then suddenly getting, not knowing this whole world, and suddenly you're getting all of these people reaching out to you saying, can you run a memory of my son? Can you run a memory of my wife, child, whatever it was? And it sounds like, that must have been, I wouldn't say a positive thing, but it must have felt like, oh, I'm not so isolated. There are a lot of people out there.
Yeah, it was weird because like when I first started sketching, it was July of 2017. And obviously, when you start doing something, you're not very good at. And I can tell you right now, the first couple of drawings that I did, they weren't the best. It was hard to read. I didn't know what I was doing, but the more practice that I got into, the better. And August, you could tell I started to learn, how to spell the names, how to space out the names, how to get them legible. One of the questions I'm asked the most is how do you get a diagonal line of a name? And I basically just tell them, I pause my app, I walk to where I want to go, I restart the app, and it'll draw the line from where I paused it to where I want it to start, and then I can continue running. And because people always ask, do you run through people's yards? Do you go through their houses? And I kind of laugh and I'm like, well, no, it's not like that. And I kind of tell them, how I do it, and I've invited others to run with me so they can see for themselves, because I've had doubters out there saying, you're not doing this. You're not, this, you're just kind of sketching it, on a phone and then saying that you ran it. And I'm like, feel free to come out and run with me, because this is kind of what I do. And this is why I post them all the time, because I want people to see, because, some people may have a name that's so original that you would not even see it on one of those little nameplates at a, store. And then they
Tell me about it. That's me.
I don't have that problem, but yep.
Yeah. So like when you see that name and well, like I said, I started with names, of friends first. And when Armstrong had cancer, we started following stories of other people that had cancer, because we had Caring Bridge sites. Our story just happened to be on a Care Pages site, where that's kind of how we journal is, we're doing this and we're doing this. Well, Care Pages unfortunately took their stuff down a few years ago, and we got most of that back. There's some stuff that we still didn't that we lost. But it's knowing that other people are reaching out to me and wanting to share their stories. And they've said, feel free to share our story.
Wow.
And it's at that time, I wasn't reaching out to other people. People were reaching out to me and were like, can you run this name? Can you run this? And it all started with childhood cancer.
Right.
And then it was adults fighting cancer. And then it was trail runners. And then it was police officers and their badge numbers who had been shot in the line of duty. And then it was, someone reached out to me and said, well, my pet was kind of like my child. Can you run my pet's name? And you just kind of like,
What kind of feedback do you get from the families or the people that do the requesting from you to run the names? Like, what are they saying to you afterwards when you send them the image of the name?
First and foremost, it's a thank you. When I first started this, I was sent names and not necessarily the stories that went with them, because they just didn't send them. They just said, hey, can you run this name? Can you run this name? And then once I got the website up and going, there was people that would post privately to me and be like, hey, this is my son's story. Is there any possible way that you can run his name? And the spelling is easy for me because they've already given me the name. So all I have to do is take a piece of paper, and it's like learning how to write. When you're a kid in, school and you learn how to write, the teacher tells you, have a top line, a middle line, and a bottom line. That's kind of what I do when I'm sketching. 95% of the time, I'm lucky enough where I have the top, middle, and bottom. Sometimes blocks are too big and I've got to, cut the names in half or do that. But it's more meaningful to me when I actually get a face-to-face encounter with families that either have lost somebody or have had someone that was fighting cancer. And I've met so many families, and they are more meaningful because I can physically see what they went through. I can see, their story and what they went through. Their siblings can talk about what they went through. You have siblings of 2, you have siblings that are 13. And then you have a story that, I had one child I ran for, not really a child, but she ended up passing away at 18, but she fought cancer 7 different times.
Wow.
And on the 8th time, she's like, you know what? I give up. I'm done. This is going to continue to come back. I'm not fighting this all my life. I'm not going through the chemo and the radiation all my life. I'm done.
Tell me, have you ever run a name and realized you made a mistake?
Absolutely.
And had to do the whole thing over again?
Absolutely. It was funny because when I first started this, I actually saw a story online where I had thought the name was Pablo. So I this is early morning. You're not quite fully awake, and you see the story. You're like, oh, great. I'm going to go run Pablo. This would be great. So I ran Pablo, and I went to go post it and read the story again. And his name was Pedro. And I'm like, and usually when I do one name, I usually do another name because I have to get back to the house somehow. And so I'm like, well, I just ran Pablo and it's Pedro. I guess I'm going to turn around and run Pedro. So I ended up running Pedro and I ended up posting it. And, the family didn't know, that I had, screwed up the name and ran the wrong name. But I do. And those that, when I tell the story, I'm like, well,
How far is your average run, would you say?
I would say each letter would average about a half a mile.
Okay, so a little less than a kilometer a letter. And if you're making a mistake, so you got to redo that whole thing. That takes a lot of mental fortitude as well as you know, you're mission focused.
Yeah, and sometimes I have it written down, and I didn't have it written down at that time, but I knew the layout of where I was running. So I had the layout in my head, and I've had it where, you know, I've missed a block, and you can see a block I've missed. The name looks great, but to me, I know that I missed that one block that could have made the name a little bit better. I've had it where my app froze in the middle of a run, and then it screws everything up, and I've got to go back and rerun it. So it's more on the app and not on me. And I got to keep an eye on the app just to make sure it's going, because if I don't, and I'm running a name, like I ran a name Odette, and there was no diagonal lines, started the app, went running, got done, was like, let me see what that looks like. And the app was like, yeah, we froze like 2.5 miles ago. So you have no
So you got to
physical.
go back and do it again. Wow.
At that
And
time, you know what?
will you do a run based on the, like, you know, today I want to get 8 kilometers in, or 4 miles in, 5 miles, and I'm going to do a longer name or a shorter name. Is that how you base it? Do you plan it out that way, or you're just like, let's see what's out there and I'm going to do a run?
Normally what I do is I like to plan my long runs and my days off, because I have such a sporadic schedule at my workplace where, you know, if I open at 4:30 in the morning and go till 2, you know, I know I've got from 2 until when the sun sets to get done. If I work, you know, a 12 to close shift, then I know that I've got from like 7:30 to 10 to get a couple names in. Usually
Right.
I'll keep the shorter names in the morning, but if I have a day off and if I travel, I'll travel somewhere and do my longer names.
So, you know, it's an interesting idea that, you know, I mean, I'm a regular runner. I run every other day. And, you know, someone once said to me, and this is a common thing, I think, is, you know, do you live to eat or do you eat to live? And, you know, one of the thoughts behind that is like, you know, am I eating this meal now just so that, hey, I can eat another meal later on? Or am I eating my meal now in order to, you know, give me strength and sustenance so that I could be a better father, I could be a better man, I could live my life and you know, get out there. And what I love about what you're doing is, you know, you're exercising, and let's be real, everybody should be exercising. It's a health, you know, for your health. But you're taking this exercise and you're kind of elevating it to be like, it's not just exercise for me. This isn't just about, this is a mundane task that you know, running can be a mundane task. Yeah, you can listen to music or whatever, but you're elevating it. You're taking it to another level, and you're saying, no, I'm going to add some real meaning behind these runs, and I'm going to make them a more meaningful thing. And I really think that it's a beautiful, beautiful idea. It's taking kind of things that we do every day, and you know, we could do them every day and just do them and keep by rote, or do them for, you know, the next task or whatever. Again, you can live to eat, or you can really take it and take it to the next level. And I really admire that about what you've done. Is taking something just that's seemingly so simple and elevating it to something really meaningful. And I think that that's something that we all can take from you as an example. Is there are lots of things that we all have to do every day, you know, myself included. And I could do that. I could just do them because I'm doing them, and I'm going to do them anyway. Or I can make them a little bit more meaningful by changing them just a little bit. Run this direction, not that direction, and it makes that much more. You know, you're changing the world. You're making people happy. You're making people feel meaning and remember their loved ones. It's a very powerful idea.
Thank you. And the funny thing is that, you know, as runners, you know, most of the runners that I know, they're doing the same miles day after day after day. And you're like, this is boring. You know, for me, you know, I may run in the same area day after day after day, but it's completely different. And if I'm running, you know, down a block and then coming back down another block, you know, I still get looks to this day where they're like, what is that guy doing? Well, I had these shirts made so that way on the back, you know, it says YouTube, the Human Etch-A-Sketch. So that way they kind of look it up when, when they're done, or when they get to work or something. Because where I do my runs in Iowa City, half of the route is residential, half of the route is college kids. And college kids, when they're walking to class, they're listening to the music, they don't care, they don't listen. And that's why I wear this shirt, because when I have to pass them and say runner on the left, and then they don't move, because I have to maintain a straight line when I'm doing this, they can see the back of my shirt and they can understand what I'm doing. And it's therapy. It's therapy for me. It's therapy for those that have lost somebody during this fight with cancer. And it's just a small breath, knowing that someone far away cares. Because like when we did our vacation in June, and I came up to Canada, I wanted to know where in Canada I could run. And I found this nice little area, Niagara on the Lake, by Lake Ontario. I was like, oh, this will look great. My wife will join me. We started running. My wife was like, yeah, I'm only going to do SIS of Sissy, or Sissy, or how you want to pronounce her name, because these blocks are too huge. And she was like, I'm just doing the SIS. I'm done. And I ended up doing it all and saw some great houses. But my process for doing that is I need to find a town that's got a gridded area. Not every town will work for what I do. And some people don't understand that. It's like, I need something of a grid that I can possibly do, and then find a story or a name that I can fit in that area. And, I had quite a few people that day look at me strange, and it all comes to the process.
Is he casing the place? It's...
You could definitely try it in Toronto. We got the nice grid system going on downtown.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is when you mentioned Toronto, is that I have tried it in bigger towns. I've tried it in Kansas City. I've tried it in Des Moines. I've tried it in Sioux City. And the buildings are too tall and they affect the GPS. So like when you're driving in that area and all of a sudden your GPS radio goes out and you're like, yep. Because right. The funny story is that, it's kind of funny, but when I had gone down to Kansas City, I was getting ready to go down there, and I'm like, I want to run in this area, and I'd mentioned it for weeks. This is where I'm going. I'm going to run here, blah, blah, blah. A day before I go down, and this lady reaches out to me and says, I don't think you should run there. My husband is a cop, and he is saying that area is not safe. And I'm like, good to know now, a day before. So I decided to try and run downtown Kansas City with a couple of my friends. And of course it came out looking like I was drunk, and, jagged lines here and there. And so I decided to go to Arrowhead, where the Chiefs and the Royals play in Kansas City. They didn't have a ball game because it was like March. So I used their parking lot, which I don't like using parking lots because it's hard to, figure out a grid. But I got a name done, at least in the parking lot. So at least Kansas City's knocked off my list.
What do you use for recording your runs?
So I use Map My Run is the one that I use. I've used it, when I first started all of this.
And you just turn that on your phone?
Yeah, I just pull it up, and there's like a subscription. They've got basic, and then you've got where you can pay monthly. And doing what I do, of course I want to pay monthly, because not only do I can see the run, but then there's another app called Relive. I think there's a Relive app where once your run is done, it'll get forwarded to the Relive, and then the Relive app will actually show the areas that I've run and how I did it.
And have you ever reached out to the people at Map My Run to let them know what you're doing?
It used to be Under Armour. It's not anymore. I was going to ask, are you using the Under Armour shoes that you can sync up to it with the Bluetooth?
Actually, I have. I've used like 6 different hover Under Armour shoes that have Bluetooth in them. And when I tell people Bluetooth is in the shoes, they're like, whoa, wait, what? They got Bluetooth and shoe? Yeah, they got the shoe has Bluetooth, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I use a pair of those myself. That map behind you that you mentioned before we started recording. What's the story behind with that map?
Okay, so with this map, this is actually the map of my state of Iowa. And I used to live in the western part of Iowa. And like I said, I started running in Avoca, and then I would move it up the county to Harlan. And then, I'd start running in different towns. And I had gotten a few counties done, I think like 8 or 10, before I went through a messy divorce. And I ended up moving to the eastern side of Iowa and kind of rebuilding my life. And I met my wife at that time, and then we got married. And during the COVID year, we have this thing in Iowa called RAGBRAI. It's the Register's annual Great Bike Ride across Iowa. And in 2020, they canceled it because of COVID. And I had vacation that I had scheduled. And we decided that in June that we would do 15 counties on the bottom. So like I would run 2, possibly 3 counties a day. And then we'd tent. And we had a tent back then. Once we got done with 15 counties, my wife was like, in a couple of years, we'll buy a camper. We'll try and figure out things with a camper. 2 days later, we were owning a pop-up camper she had found on Craigslist, and we ended up buying a pop-up camper. And then we used that for the 17 counties in the north to try and get those done. Because technically that's where RAGBRAI was supposed to be at that time, was in the north. So we decided the names that I had, I would try and figure out where I could run. And some of those counties, I actually got to meet the families that I was running for. And that was really cool because I could hear their story. I got to meet a couple of people where, they had gone through it. They were clear now, but back then they couldn't, they pretty much told me their story. And I told my wife, I said, well, if we're going to do 15 counties and 17 counties, what do you think about running all the counties in Iowa? And she's like, that's actually a brilliant idea. And so, but on some weekends, we'd hit some of the counties that were nearby. And then we'd be like, okay, let's drive to, this county, and we'll camp there for a couple days, and we'll go hit, the counties around it. And I actually finished this project. I technically started it in 2017. Wasn't a goal of mine. Didn't just kind of happened where I moved to the eastern side. My life got better. We started experimenting with new counties. We met new people and new stories. And we finished this in August of 2020, where the last county was Scott County in Iowa. And we met a family that day too. So, and I told her, I said, like Forrest Gump, I'm like, I'm not shaving my beard until we're done. And she's like, let's get going. Let's start going. Let's get them done.
Did you get the smiley t-shirts made?
I should have, but I didn't. She was more happy. She had a bigger smile knowing that her husband was shaving his beard. But we had a little parody video with that. We did a little parody video of Forrest Gump where instead of him saying he was tired and he was just going to go home, I said I was tired and just wanted to shave. So we were having a little fun with that. And it's all fun when you just make it fun. And to go to different counties and different areas, there's some counties where the streets are big and long, and there's some areas where there was maybe 12 towns in that county, and you had to find one city out of those 12 that had some sort of grid in it to fit a 3-letter name to make it work. So
You ever go out of state?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have. To this day, I have sketched at least one name in 19 states, 1 province, and 1 foreign country. Wow. And my goal now, which is kind of a big goal now, is to hit all 50 and maybe some more provinces along the way. But that also becomes logistically, how do you make that happen? Do you fly? Do you drive? Is the gas prices going to come down ever? It's just like, okay, because the ones that we just did in June, we hit Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and then we hit Ontario, and then we swung back around, and then we hit Michigan on the way home.
Right.
All with a camper. So camper might be a little bit tougher to go to further places, but for right now, I'm at 19, and, I told the wife, I said, when we get to 49 and 50, that might have to be Alaska and Hawaii. It'd be a good time to celebrate.
Catch a nice flight or a cruise. Do an Alaskan cruise and finish it off that way.
Oh, that'd be great. Maybe, yeah. So one of my finishing goals would be to either do it in one of those states and maybe include water. Try and do like a half sand, half water run, but it's going to be kind of tough depending on how deep the water is.
Yeah, interesting.
But
what's your process of actually mapping out the letters and everything? Are you going out onto the street, walking it out? Or are you looking at a map on the computer and kind of drawing it out? Like, because I know, like, I was looking at your story and everything, you kind of have to get it exact to where you need to stop, where you need to go, where you need to turn. So how do you keep that in your mind when you are on the run? Like, how do you actually plan that out from the beginning?
So in Iowa City, where I've done almost 50% of my runs, I've got an area where I can do up to a 6-letter. If I want to make it longer, there is a way where I can pause the app and kind of walk around, the houses and kind of make a straight line and make that work. But normally I look at a town and look at a gridded area and see how big of a name I can make it, because there's some places where I can do a 2-letter name, and there's been some where I do believe my longest one was 12 letters.
12 letters.
12 letters. So you're talking.
Was that a name or a word or a phrase?
I think one of the longest names that I've done was my son Montgomery, and you've got 2 M's in that name, so you're talking moving it over quite a bit. That was it was kind of a graduation present for him in 2018 when he was graduating high school. So it was kind of like a small present for him. But I've done some phrases, and if I have a town where it's like gridded quite a bit, I want to try and see if I can make a phrase out of it. I mean, most of the times I will, run one word and then use the collage app and kind of put the words together to make the collage.
Right.
Or I'll just go out and do it. And then the thing is if you try and do it in one shot and you screw up halfway through it, you kind of have to start over. So
yeah, you can't shake the Etch-A-Sketch out and redo, because you gotta.
There have been a couple times where I'm glad I have paint on my phone, because I've actually ran a block further than I should have. So then I'll come back and then I'll screenshot the run once I'm done, because that's how I show it when I post it. But one of the names I went too far, so I used the paint on the phone and kind of drew a white line, kind of making it look like a street when I'd screwed up. But more times than not, if I know the area like Iowa City, I'll go out and just run the name, and I'll actually have it on a piece of paper, so that way I don't screw up the spelling of it or the name of it. But sometimes I'll just go out and do whatever comes to mind. In 2017 on September 11th, I wasn't going to do a name that day. I was like, I can't do a name today, because I went out and drew Never Forget, just sketched it. It was like, here's my sketch for the day. I can't do names today. And there were people that were telling me their stories. I didn't even ask for their stories. They just told their stories and said, this is where I was at September 11th. Thank you for doing this. I didn't even expect it. And I was like, so this is kind of what it's like. I go, just reaching out, just posting my run. You never know who you're going to touch when you're doing it.
You really don't. And that's the incredible thing about this and what you're doing, because you're doing something to honor lost loved ones. You're doing something to honor family and friends. Um, and that's why I asked you earlier, like, what is their response to you doing this for them? Because, for instance, at our office, one of our case managers built this beautiful picture. She has these metal butterflies that she bought, spray painted them all different colors, and she got names of the kids that we lost to cancer engraved into the butterflies, put them on a design onto a piece of wood and everything in a way of remembering them and honoring them. So one of a mom that is now volunteering for us lost her son to cancer when he was very young. And when she saw the picture, she asked the case manager what it was about, and she told her, and she goes, "Thank you very much. Because of that, I'm gonna think of his butterfly and know that he's still around and still here." And it really, acts like this really do have such an incredible impact on people's lives. And I don't think, again, what Morty said, like, unless you've been through it, you don't know. And to have somebody like you doing this for people, because you want to give back to them, because you want them to have memory, because they want a place, or because so they have a place, I should say, to share their story, and it's incredible. It's a beautiful thing that you are doing.
Thank you. And sometimes when I reach out to complete strangers and tell them, hey, this is kind of what I do, you know, sometimes I'll ask if I can run their name. I have never been told no, I cannot run their name. We have a thing in Iowa City, the kid captain of the week when football season comes. And every home game at the end of the first quarter, 75, 80,000 people in Kinnick Stadium here in Iowa City, they'll turn if they're not facing it already, and they'll wave to Children's Hospital to all the patients that are up there. And it's a big deal. It started, which ironically started in 2017. And so now every home game that we do, and we only get like 6 or 7 of them tops a year, we'll face that hospital. And for 60 seconds to 90 seconds, I want to say most of the people in that stadium will get emotional waving to those kids, because most of them don't know what they're going through. And when they see it on TV, they're like, oh, that's so cool. When you see it in person and do it in person, it's completely different. And every time I've gone, and I've got season tickets, and I cry every time, because some of those kids that are up there, I'm actually running for. And to share their story, and for them to reach back and say, I really appreciate what you've done. We had a story last month where a mom lost her husband and 2 kids in a mudslide in California, and she had moved to Iowa, and she had told her story on the news. And I went out and ran her business's name, and I ran her name, and I basically went to her appointment and basically introduced myself, said, hey, this is kind of what I do. I want to share this with you. And she was stunned by the generosity of what I did, that she had asked if she owed me anything. And I'm like, you don't owe me anything. It's the way of me saying thank you for sharing your story. So she told me her story, and then she has in her office the 43 members that had passed away in that mudslide. And I'll be sharing all 43 names of those people once I run them all for her.
That's incredible.
So you don't know, what story is going to hit you. You don't know, but every person's got a story, and every name has a story, and it should be told whether they're still living or if they've passed on, because we need to hear it. We need to know, what this child went through, or what that child went through, or, it's just different stories. You know, it started with one thing and now it's like progressively gotten better because of the stories and the people that I've shared this with.
How is this helping you now, coping with everything?
I would say it helps me first and foremost because it's a form of exercise and it's something that I love to do. Currently, I'm on a streak of over 900 days of at least running 20 minutes a day. And I'm trying to get to that 1,000th day, which will be sometime in September. And that's known as the comma day, where, you know, once you hit 1,000, that's the comma day. And along the way, with all the stories and all the names that I've done, you know, I feel blessed to be able to do this for others. And once I'm done with the name, then it's okay. I got to write the post. It's kind of like a second job. My wife jokes with me now. She's like, it's kind of like your second job. You're not getting paid for it. It's kind of like volunteer, but you're doing you're doing what you need to do to enjoy life, because that's kind of what it's all about, is to enjoy life and to share stories with others. Because in this day and age with social media, where, you know, you can reach out to somebody miles away in a matter of seconds and share a name or share a story. You know, it could be shared by thousands, it could be shared by tens, and I feel good no matter what name I've ran. And I may not even know the story. You know, if it's just a name and I don't know the story, I'm completely fine with that. But knowing more of the story makes the run more personal, because I know in my head the story behind what I'm about to attempt to do. And, you know, I've, you know, doing this since 2017, I'm closing in on 1,500 names.
1,500 names.
1,500 names. And they range all over from cancer, from, you know, life-changing events for children, for adults. And it's just basically been all over, you know, being able to do this is great, and being able to travel and meet new people. I mean, or meet friends that have known me for so long that finally get a chance to meet me. You know, it does get emotional, and I'm completely fine with that. I'm okay crying, because it's just showing an emotion that we all have. And it's just something that I really enjoy doing, and being able to help other people along the way.
No, absolutely. I mean, you can't not get emotional about doing this stuff, hearing the stories, have gone through it. Um, you know, so I was wondering, do you do this with any charities? Are you raising money for anything, or is this just you going out with the name kind of thing? Like when you're traveling across a state or across the country or anything, like are you running for like obviously you're running for a cause, but are you running for a different kind of cause at the same time, or?
There's been times where I've run for St. Jude. There's been times I've ran for Alex's Lemonade Stand. We have a dance marathon through the University of Iowa that I've helped raise money for. So there's a bunch of different organizations. You know, Red Shamrock's a local foundation here in town that helps out. So I try and help out. You know, I kind of like, we'll do like a monthly, sometimes we'll do like a monthly donation or a monthly type of raising money for a business. It's not all the time. Like I'll pick, like, you know, obviously September being Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Last year it was Dance Marathon, where I attempted and succeeded in running 24 names in 24 hours.
24 names, 24 hours.
It was a crazy stunt that my wife was a part of, and when I got done, she's like, "Don't ever do that again."
Why?
But But the wild thing is that I covered at least every letter in the alphabet at least once, and ran over 87 miles in 24 hours, which is an equivalent to over 3 marathons in 24 hours. And I would go out and I would run 2 names. I would come to the camper because we set up a lodging type headquarters. I would change, I would get something to eat, wipe down, go out and do it again. And I'm lucky that my app didn't freeze. I'm lucky that I didn't misspell a word or a name. But it was definitely challenging, and it was definitely well worth it because we ended up raising over $7,500 for Children's Hospital here in town.
That's awesome. Have other people attempted doing what you do kind of thing after being with you and watching you do this? Or is it just kind of like, that's incredible, I'm not going to attempt it, and it's all yours?
There have actually been a couple of times where they wanted me to run my own name. And I'm like, it's not about me. I ended up running my name. I was like name 403 because it just happened to be my birthday, 4-3. So I'm like, okay, 403, I'll run my name, But I've had other people run, those. Sometimes I had a runner in New York reach out to me and be like, hey, can you show me how you do that? And kind of show, like, can you spell this out for me? And I'll see if I can run it. She's a big Buffalo Bills fan. And I found an area for her where she could run Bills. And she went out and ran it. And she was like, that was so cool. It was like the coolest thing that she's ever done. And I find it, fun because I can help those along the way. And sometimes after running with me, they don't want to do it. And there's runners out there that, that have done it and continue to do it. And, I'm kind of blown away because some of these people that do the drawings and don't do things, just do the drawings. I'm like blown away. I'm like, whoa, I'm not that artistic, but it's really cool to see. I get tagged in quite a few, and I just find it, kind of as an honor that they would think of me when they saw that.
Oh, for sure. I'm curious. What is one of the most interesting or craziest stories you've heard from a family?
Well, I just met a family. This is kind of weird. So I met a family in Indiana. I ran in Kokomo, and their family came up. They lost their son a few years ago. So I was running their son's name, Mason. And we ran Mason. We get done because we talked about before, and we did a news report on that, and we got done. And we finished up, and I was talking to the mom and dad about it. And I looked at their license plate, and it said RZ4503. And that was just their random license plate that they had from Indiana. And I'm like, that is so weird, your license plate. And they're like, what? And I'm like, well, RZ is my initials. The 4 and the 5 added up as 9 is the day that my son passed away. And the 03 was his age. And they were like, and I'm kind of big in numbers. And, I try and find the significance in numbers because that's kind of what I do. And they were like, that's kind of cool. So like they're now apart, and, we're looking forward to meeting them again later, in the near future. But to be able to hear Mason's story and then being able to see their license plate afterwards and be like putting it all together,
that's incredible.
And knock on wood. Yeah, knock on wood. I haven't been bit by a dog, but I've been chased by a few. But so far, no, definitely haven't been bit yet. And I usually don't wear headphones because of that reason.
Just remember, you don't have to run faster than the dog. You just have to run faster than the person you're running with.
Exactly. Oh, see ya. Goodbye. No, but
Exactly.
yeah, but it's just something that when you see posts of people getting bit by dogs, and then you're wondering, were they listening to music and not paying attention? Yeah. So
Listen, I was a dog trainer and a dog walker for a little bit before I do what I do now. So I've had my fair share of bites and attacks. So I know what it's like.
yeah, not fun.
No, definitely isn't. I'm just looking at the time right now. We are coming to an end. Wanted to ask you something. What kind of advice would you give parents, fathers, mothers, kids that have been through something like you have been to kind of help them along?
My advice is to take things day at a time, journal everything, take pictures when you can. If you have lost a child, do something in memory of them. If they like to paint, paint something. If they love to run, go run something. Whatever they love to do, find something that you will remember them by doing it. And whether it's one time or if you do it, once a year, or in my case, every day, you're doing your best to keep the memory of the person that you loved with you. And if you have a child that's still fighting, if you have siblings of child that's fighting, include them in everything. They are a part of the journey too, and they may feel left out because of the one child that's going through what they're going through. But try to involve them in things. Try and do things with them. Get them involved. Take group pictures. They may not be the best picture. Your child might be sick, but take the group picture anyway, because down the road you're going to wish you had.
How can people find you?
People can find me if they go to runforarmstrong.com, or if they hashtag Human Etch-A-Sketch, all one word. On the website, they can actually reach out and send me stories. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. So if they want to reach out, they can find me that way. And if they want to send me a story and want me to run for a name, any name is completely fine. Any story is completely fine. Like I said, I've ran for multiple people and will continue to run for multiple people for as long as I can.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. It's such an incredible story, the journey that you've been through and everything, and how you are going. I don't know how you run every single day. I can barely run 2 days in a row. It's incredible. Your lung capacity must be beyond. I don't think that's phenomenal what you're doing. Keep it up. Honestly, you are making such a huge impact in people's lives, whether you realize it or not. Obviously, you do know what you're doing with this and how it is impacting people. Honestly, just keep going with it. It's fantastic to see this. It really.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm just honored to be able to do this for others, and will continue to do it for as long as I'm allowed to.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll have you back soon. Thank you, Rik, for taking the time to speak with us today. We greatly appreciate your story and all you've been through. Most of us can't imagine what it would be like to lose a child, nor how it would affect us. So finding an outlet like you have is a great step forward, especially when it is helping others in a similar situation. Thank you to the listeners for joining us today and listening to Rik's story. We hope that you were able to take some hope and inspiration away from what you've heard today. On Air with Chai is a Chai Lifeline Canada project produced by myself, Bryan Strasberg, hosted by myself and the Chai Lifeline Canada Executive Director, Mordechai Rothman. Guests are booked by Orly Davis, and graphic design is done by Candice Alper. On Air with Chai is edited by myself, and the music is provided by Music Unlimited at pixabay.com. To learn more about Chai Lifeline and how you can help us, please visit our website at chailifelinecanada.org.